Alright, let's check out this video from Saint Tontas. I think I'm butchering his name every time I say it, but let's watch another one of his videos. Great content on this channel. Definitely deserves way more subscribers than he's got. The best combat system in gacha gaming. It's got to be talking about Wuthering Waves. It's in the game description, so it makes sense. And obviously, we see Changli on the screen. But let's just face it, it is. It is. The only one in terms of action combat that I guess you could potentially compare it to is maybe Zenless, but Zenless is just different. It's less manual. It's nuanced, but just less complex. Not saying that this game's complicated, but it does have a real complexity and nuance to it, and it is by far the best combat system in any gacha, in my opinion, and it handles itself with other games outside the space as well. It's that good, in my opinion. But let's see what he's got to say about the combat system. And I will say one thing as well. I'm kind of nervous about going back to Genshin because it's just going to feel so bad. Combat is in that game after playing this game for a while. Let's check it out, though.
If there was only one word you could choose to describe the combat in Wuthering Waves, I'd choose the word
tight. Nah, that's probably bad. Epic. Fun. Let's let him say.
satisfying. In an action RPG,
I'll go with that as well, actually. I'll go with that. That's definitely better. That's definitely better. I'm stupid. It is satisfying. It definitely is very satisfying, actually. I just think it's very tight as well. Like, it just feels tight. You know, it feels like it's really well designed. And it is super fun as well. You know, playing as Jinsei, Changli, Calcharo, they're just really fun characters to play with. And satisfying as well. Satisfying is probably the best descriptive word there, really. It definitely is.
Combat is the foundation that the game is built on. You can't progress through the story or upgrade your characters without engaging with the combat.
Yep.
Every single action that a player takes, be it grinding echoes or farming ascension materials, works towards improving a player's ability to fight.
Definitely. One thing I would like to see from the game, though, is more abstract elements of gameplay that are not combat-based, that progress you in some way in gathering materials or whatever it is, asteroids or shell credits or whatever it might be. That's kind of like how Star Rail does it, and a lot of the gacha games do, where it's like it's totally separate. It's not actually the core gameplay loop, and it might not even be controlling the actual characters you use in the game, like some sort of tabletop element or whatever it might be. That's just different. I would like to see more of that into this game, if I'm honest, but the combat in this game is great, though.
Fight enemies. It's where you spend a majority of your time across your playthroughs, and Kuro hit it out of the park.
They really did.
They really did. Without a doubt, one of the most engaging combat systems we've seen across the past few years. With a
I agree with that. Like, I'm even saying outside of the gacha space, the combat in this game is genuinely really good. The intro, outros, the synergy, just the responsiveness of it as well. How your teams work together, the concerto, the forte, the actual kits that the characters have. They're all really interesting and fun to use, feel intuitive, and it's just really well designed. So it'll be interesting to see when we get more characters added into the game, how they hold that up, if it continues to be so well designed, because obviously the more characters get added to the game, the more difficult it is to keep making unique characters that actually have genuinely interesting and fun kits as well. So it'd be interesting to see where they go with it.
Huge emphasis placed on timing-based mechanics like dodges and parries, alongside nuanced mechanics spread across individual kits that makes every single character feel incredibly unique. Combine these features together with the varied and complex movesets of enemies, you have a recipe for a fantastic experience.
Agree with the enemies as well. They're definitely, like with a lot of gacha games, it just feels like you get DPS checked and there's not really much else other than that. Now, obviously, that's a quite general take and it's not exactly true altogether. But there's genuine patterns with the, especially with the holograms. You know, you've got to learn patterns. You've got to be quick. You've got to have some mechanical skill. It's not all just about the characters and stats and numbers. Obviously, that's a big part of it as well. It's a gacha game. But it genuinely feels like a full-on action role-playing game that takes skill to play as well, at least for the harder content. Obviously, a lot of the other content you can kind of just roll through, but the harder content definitely does. You need to lock on, don't you? Or lock in.
That blends game knowledge, technical skill, and actual risk together into one amazing package. There's a reason why many believe Wuthering Waves has the best combat system in gacha gaming. Today we'll be discussing why this is the case, breaking
Well, let's
down
get into
what
it.
makes combat so appealing in Wuthering Waves, why it's so fantastic compared to its peers, and the nuances across the game's team building that give it a lot more depth than you might think.
I agree with that. I agree with that. I think the game definitely does have some nuance and depth to the team compilations and the synergy that you use with characters. I feel like people are learning new tech all the time with the game and new, better ways to use people together against certain enemies. Like, look when Chang Li dropped, everybody thought she was kind of mid. And, like, the more that people are learning how to use her, she's just getting better and better and better. And her burst damage is insane. And, you know, she's like where people are learning all the different animation cancels and the swaps that you can use with that. Like, she's actually kind of ridiculous. And it's really good to see that, you know, there's a little bit more under the surface of a lot of the characters in the game.
As always, if you're enjoying this content, please make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Wuthering Waves is a game where you can field up to 3 characters at once. And wow, do they take advantage of the party system. The game heavily emphasizes swapping to and from every member of your team to get the best possible performance out of your composition. The beauty of this system comes from Wuthering Waves' implementation of a unique resource called Concerto Energy. This energy is what drives effective and meaningful team interactions across the roster. Concerto Energy, when filled, gives the currently unfielded character the ability to cast their outro skill, while simultaneously swapping onto a new character. These outro skills
The outro and intro system in the game is really well designed. It really is what, like, adds that extra element to the combat in terms of, like, swapping at the right time and also encouraging you to use everybody in the team if you want that best efficiency. Because a lot of the games kind of, like, it feels like you can kind of just, like, one-man them, you know, just one guy a boss in a way. And I know you can in this game, depending on how you're playing it or how good you are at the game. But it really encourages you, if you want the maximum efficiency, to switch through your team and to do it in the right way as well. You know, not just to spam through things, but actually use your kits in the right way. Use the right builds to build up everything as quick as potentially possible, and then switching out to the next character to get the best out of the next character as well. Really good system, in my opinion.
skills typically inflict a huge amount of damage or provide a damage buff to the newly on-fielded character. When Concerto Energy is filled through actions on field, like attacking or casting abilities, you have to spread your gameplay across your team to gain access to these incredible buffs and attacks. What some players may not realize is that this Concerto Energy doesn't just provide buffs to your party. It's also a tool that streamlines the gameplay of your characters as well. This is because
It's great as well, if you use it at the right time, to get those clutch dodges in or coming at characters from different angles, especially in some of the hologram fights as well.
every single
Closing the
character in
distance
game
also. You know, closing the distance is a great thing sometimes when you use your switches at the right time to get right up to an enemy to carry on the bombardment, so to speak.
has an intro skill that's automatically cast whenever they're switched onto after an outro skill. These intro skills typically directly contribute to another unique resource that every character has, called a Forte circuit. This circuit, when filled, allows the character to use enhanced abilities that have an additional effect, and perhaps most importantly, generate more Concerto Energy. What this means is that there's a lot of incentive to master the individual movesets and rotations of your characters, not just your main DPS, but every single character in the party.
Yeah, as I said, as I was just saying, it's like a great system that encourages that. If you want the best out of your team, it encourages you to use your kit right, to use your abilities right, to then move on to the next character and continue doing it and get your full rotation. It really encourages you to try and learn the character's movesets and the kit as well, which is it's really good, that is, because it makes you look into it a little bit more and peek under the bonnet, so to speak, or under the hood for you Americans, to really learn what's going on. Like,
When you factor in echo skills and advanced mechanics like swap canceling as well, there's even more room to progress your personal mastery of specific teams. Coming from games where the maximum skill expression you can have on certain characters is pressing 2 buttons and swapping off,
it really is kind of limited in Genshin. I know there's people who will argue that it's not, but I think in comparison, it just really is limited. Again, for me, the game is just all about, like, the what is it, your freaking what's it called now? I forgot, man. It's been that long since I've played. Your actual elemental synergy or whatever the name is for it. It just has way less layers to it, in my opinion. It's like, it's really quite basic.
This is an absolute breath of fresh air. However, we've only just scratched the surface. We haven't even talked about enemy design and how it elevates this entire system. At a baseline, Wuthering Waves is a game that challenges you. Enemies are incredibly aggressive, attack frequently, and in higher level content can oftentimes destroy you in as little as 1 or 2 direct hits. What this means is that there's more danger.
Also, they actually have different attacks and attack patterns as well, don't they, in the higher holograms and stuff, which is cool. You know, the first few times I went up a couple of levels in the holograms, I was like, holy shit, dude, they didn't do this before, which is like, you know, I like that. You know, it's not just the same thing again, just with extra health and extra damage. They're actually doing other things that make you, all right then, I've got to learn this now. I've got to learn how to combat this, and I really like that about it.
More risks and more challenges that'll cause mistakes as you engage with the game's combat. But with these challenges come opportunities, and capitalizing on these opportunities is what turns the game from an optimal rotation simulator into an actually engaging action RPG game. Coupled with these dangers are an array of mechanics that allow you to avoid damage completely. Things like dodging at the right moments, parrying an enemy's attack with your own, or breaking an enemy's poise by depleting their stagger bar, rendering them immobile while increasing their damage taken. When dodges build up concerto energy, while parries and intro skills deal additional damage to stagger bars, it's clear that there's a huge amount of interaction between your management of your team's rotations and your reaction to enemy moves. There's a lot of potential skill expression involved when it comes to conquering content.
There really is. Like, you see some people playing the game, sometimes you're like, holy shit, dude, I didn't even know my character was capable of that crap, you know? And I just don't think you get that from a lot of the other gachas. It's all about the haves and have-nots rather than... And of course, it's still in this game. At the end of the day, it's a gacha game. If you don't have the characters, you just don't have the characters. And if you don't have the particular 5 stars, you're just not going to do certain things that you're going to be able to do with them. But still... you know, the actual skill expression is insane.
Huge amount of emphasis placed on understanding an enemy's moveset and the capabilities of your on-fielded character, knowing that some characters cannot parry while others can avoid attacks completely while in the air. It's a system that's intentional.
That's what I was saying. I feel bad for the people who only have something like, which I don't think there's many, as Chia as their only DPS, because you're lacking that ability to parry, and that sucks, which is an extra issue. Going back to the video when we were talking about the problem with the 4-star characters, the 4-star resonators, and the big gap between the 5 stars and 4 stars.
And it's a system that gives a ton of control to the player, unlike other games with similar combat.
Yeah, this is what I was talking about with Zenless Zone Zero, how, to me, it kind of fits in between Star Rail and Genshin, in the sense that it's an action combat game, but you lose the manual aspect of the game. You know, the game kind of takes that away from you at points, doesn't it? And I'm not a big fan of that, if I'm honest. And I think there's going to be changes made to that by the looks of what the devs were saying. But it's still an interesting point, because that's where, to me, because I've seen people arguing that the combat's better in Zenless Zone Zero, and obviously everyone's got their opinion. I just think it's cut and dry. That Wuthering Waves is just far superior, in my opinion.
However, one of the growing complaints when it comes to the combat system in Wuthering Waves is its lack of depth in team building, specifically when it comes to its implementation of elements, or in this case, attributes. Coming from prior game systems that involve the combining of 2 or more elements to create something bigger, Wuthering Waves' implementation, or rather lack of implementation of elemental reactions, is what some players find lacking. Attributes in Wuthering Waves might appear shallow at first, with characters.
I can see people saying that, but you combine, you get your synergy in different ways, don't you? Rather than it actually being elemental, it's more on your outros and how you're using the kits as well. So I don't necessarily think it's not there. It's just kind of in a different guise, if that makes sense.
Characters dealing damage of a single attribute, and enemies typically having a resistance to 1 or 2 of them. All it looks like on the surface is a roster check to ensure that you have a wide variety of main DPS characters. It's important to keep in mind that this is a gacha game, and this kind of roster check is pretty universal across the genre.
True.
However, the system is more than that. The game already possesses a fair amount of depth across its team building. At a baseline, the elemental system of Genshin Impact requires you to field 2 specific characters at once to use an elemental reaction in the first place, while Wuthering Waves instead focuses on pairing characters that synergize with each other through their outro skills or kit interactions. For example, Mortifi, a heavy attack buffer, will have his best performance with a team member who inflicts heavy attack.
Dude, I love using him with Jian. Like, he's so good with the Jian. Don't get me wrong, I tend to use Yinlin a lot, but I really like using. I haven't used him for a while, but I really like using Mortifi with Jian. It's a match made in heaven.
Damage, like Jian. However, Mortifi can also be used as a battery for Jinxi's damage, as he can provide coordinated attacks that fuel her forte circuit while making no actual use of his outro skills buff. You might not be using every single part of Mortifi's kit, but he can still function as a teammate across your compositions. In other games, this versatility is simply not there. Instead of characters interacting with colored auras on the enemy, characters interact with other characters' kits. You can use
Exactly, as I was saying, that system's kind of there. It's not. It's different. It's just in a different guise. It's there through the kits, through the outros, through the intros, through their buffing capabilities, through their ults as well. I think it's a really well designed system, and and again, going back to what we were saying about more characters coming out, and obviously the uniqueness becoming harder to come by. It'll be really interesting also to see the synergy between kits and the potential of that when we expand the roster of characters and we see more people coming in, and how all these characters are going to work with each other. This is why I say the potential for this game to alleviate power creep in a way is really quite powerful if they bring out the right characters in the future in making older characters way better, because people were talking about power creep when Jinxie came out, which for me, I don't think it was necessarily there. Obviously, I know you could do a lot more damage with her, but you had to work a little bit more to get it out of her. And when I say work, I'm not talking like playing, it's not harder, but there's just a little bit more complexity in comparison to somebody like Jian, who's just a battering ram. But I'll be interested to see the sort of supports that we get and the sort of sub DPSs that we get in the future that will really lift up some of the characters that may be kind of getting left by the wayside now. Potentially people like Calcharo, and I don't know, future characters who come out in the future as well, who might not look great when they initially come out, but potentially get better when other characters come out after them. I'll be interested to see that.
Use characters across a far wider variety of compositions in Wuthering Waves. This adds far more nuance to the gameplay than you might think. The problem is that these nuanced mechanics across team building are tied to new characters. We have to remember that Wuthering Waves is first and foremost a gacha game. There has to be incentive to pull new characters, and there is
Exactly. This is what I was saying when I was talking about the weapon situation and the 4-star resonators. That's always going to kind of be there, and it has to be for the game and the gacha system to fundamentally work and to be profitable, because if not, it's just not going to drive people to pull, is it? And at the end of the day, then they're not going to make money. That's the baseline, what they want to do, isn't it?
There's a lot of potential, especially from what we've seen with Jinxie's interaction with the roster, to add new mechanics that interact with the team or the enemy in new ways and add additional layers to the gameplay. But it's important to recognize that there's a huge amount of depth already in the game's baseline combat. Having simpler teams that focus on the mastery of its core mechanics isn't a bad thing, and only promotes accessibility across the player base. Overall, there's a lot of complexity involved when it comes to the combat in Wuthering Waves. The magic occurs when you take all of these different mechanics and bring them together, creating an incredibly engaging experience that tests your personal mastery of individual character kits, your knowledge of enemy movesets, and nuances across team building.
Exactly, I agree with that, yeah. It does, it really pushes you to learn individual characters, but then also learn to get the best out of them with the rest of the team. And I'm not saying this is unique to Wuthering Waves, but I just think it's done in a really interesting, engaging way. I love the intro-outro system, the concerto, the forte gauge. It works pretty much how it's supposed to. I think it's a really interesting system that I can't I can't wait till we get an expansion on the roster and see, the potential of the systems and the way the kits intermingle and work with each other. It'll be nice to look back in 6 months and see how far the metas come within the game and the skill expressions come in the game as well.
We're likely going to see more new playstyles and potential team compositions with new releases. And we've already seen
this dude's reading my mind, man.
that Kuro has a lot of creativity to work with. Hopefully,
Sure,
this
keeper looks
overview was
awesome as
helpful
well.
in highlighting what makes combat in Wuthering Waves so great, and the amazing potential it has in the future. As always, if you enjoyed this content, please hit that like and subscribe button. Peace out.
Great video, great video. You should definitely check out Tontas. Dude makes amazing videos for a small channel. It's incredible the content he's putting out, and he's not just throwing out crap either. Dude knows what he's talking about. He's took the time to actually look at things before he says it, and I pretty much agree with. Well, I agree with everything he said in that video. The combat in the game is really easy to get into. It's satisfying. It's fun. It's got nuance. There is extra complexity there. The combat definitely has layers, especially when you start to bring in all your team synergy together and the kits and how to intertwine the kits with other characters and your outros and your intros, and then bring in your concerto and your forte and particular ults on certain characters. And we're just at the start of the game. We've still got quite a small roster on the game. It's just going to get better, in my opinion. I can't wait for the potential interesting characters and interesting kits that are going to come in the future updates. And again, as I say, not to wish my life away, but I can't wait for the next 6 to 12 months to look back and see how far the game's come, and hopefully it's in a positive way, and Kuro really think about these things, because I think the way the kits and the synergy of the characters work is the best way to combat power creep, but still allow them to create FOMO with the characters and a want and a need to get these characters, but also to stop them like power creeping away from previous characters. And that's where the supports and the sub DPSs will come in there to make older characters even better. So if you've not managed to get the new cool DPS that's super flashy and super powerful, but you managed to get a new sub DPS or a support character that's made one of your old characters that really was slacking and lagging behind, he's now up there in the meta. Be interesting to see how they tackle it. But yeah, great video from Saint Tontas, guys. You should definitely check him out. Go subscribe, like the videos. Great video that was. Great video.